Hello, and once again, welcome to A River Between Chaos and Zen, the poetry podcast from Creative Actors Lab. My name is Max. And the title of River Between Chaos and Zen actually comes from a blog that I wrote every week for 52 weeks. In about 2012, actually, and there's something I wanted to read from it today, actually. This particular entry is dated May 27th, 2012. And basically, so much of, or at least the way this podcast is developing at this point is, where does poetry come from? And probably the best way to do that is to start with me and where does the stuff come from. So I wanted to share a couple of things, one of which is an entry from the blog, but then there's some other stuff. And for me, poetry, which is so dear and just near and dear to my heart and my soul and my brain, that it comes from my grandfather. Sidney Robinson, my mom's father. He was a British gentleman. He was he grew up in a rural farming family. I don't think he ever completed school. He might have, but I don't think so. But they were. My grandparents and everybody pretty much else from around that time and vicinity. This was in Northampton, England. He was born in, I think, 1895. Pretty much, you had to leave school to go help on the family farm, and I think he had something like 10 brothers and sisters. It was pretty crazy. I can't imagine that now, but my grandfather was one of the dearest people in the world to me. He still is. And as I have said to various people before, overall for me, the subject of family is an exceptionally difficult one. I'm very grateful for the family I have now, for my wife Kelly and our daughters, and then any amount of little four-footed, furry ones who have come to be part of the family. But for me, family is a very difficult subject, and I just go back and think about some of the very few people in my life who just mean the world and beyond to me. One of them was my grandfather, Sid Robinson. We grew up basically, and he and my grandmother, they were very British. He was just a gentleman British farmer. He had his own plant nursery for many years, and he just he would be. It was the sort of thing to where it's like. We lived next door to him for the first 8 years of my life, and he was the sort of thing to where it's like you would walk in the door and he knew how you would open the door, and anytime I would go into his house I would open the door and he'd be all the way on the other end of the house and you would hear, "Hello, buddy!" And I love that. And we grew up hearing a lot of words like bloody and blimey and things like that, and he was a writer. And that's what I want to talk about. One thing, I have a poem here. It's called the Passionate Man's Pilgrimage, and this is the sort of a thing that he would have read from his from his heritage and his native country and all of that. And it's by Sir Walter Raleigh. And the thing about him, about my granddad, is that he was a 5-pack-a-day smoker, and he smoked Raleigh cigarettes, and I have this very clear picture in my head of he had a drawer full of packs of Raleigh cigarettes with a little imprint of Sir Walter Raleigh on the on the cigarette pack, and how, oh, he spread out his cloak on the mud so the ladies would not get their shoes dirty, and it was such a charm that you just don't see a whole heck of a lot around anymore, and I miss it. But if I may, this is called the Passionate Man's Pilgrimage. He would have loved this, and he probably did. Give me my scallop shell of quiet, my staff of faith to walk upon, my scrip of joy, immortal diet, my bottle of salvation, my gown of glory, hope's true gauge, and thus I'll take my pilgrimage. Blood must be my body's balmer, no other balm will there be given, whilst my soul, like a white palmer, travels to the land of heaven, over the silver mountains where spring and nectar fountains, and there I'll kiss the bowl of bliss, and drink my eternal fill on every milken hill. My soul will be a dry before, and after it will never thirst more. And by the happy blissful way more peaceful pilgrims I shall see, that have shook off their gowns of clay, and go apparelled fresh like me. I'll bring them first to slake their thirst, and then to taste those nectar sucklets, as the clear wells where sweetness dwells, drawn up by saints in crystal buckets. And when our bottles and all we are filled with immortality, then the holy paths will travel, strewn with rubies thick as gravel, ceilings of diamonds, sapphire floors, high walls of coral, and pearl bowers. From thence to heaven's bribeless hall, where no corrupted voices brawl, no conscience molten into gold, nor forged accusers bought and sold, no cause deferred, nor vain spent journey. For there Christ is King's attorney, who pleads for all without degrees, and he hath angels, but no fees. When the grand 12,000,000 jury of our sins will sinful, when the grand 12,000,000 jury of our sins with sinful fury 'gainst our souls black verdicts give, Christ pleads his death, and then we live. Be thou my speaker, taintless pleader, unblotted lawyer, true proceeder. Thou movest salvation even for alms, not with a bribed lawyer's palms. And this is my eternal plea to him that made heavens, earth, and sea, seeing my flesh must die so soon, and want a hand to dine next moon. Just as the stroke, when my veins start and spread, set on my soul an everlasting head, then I am ready, like a palmer fit, and tread those blessed paths which before I writ. And I remember being a little boy, and he got a book, and for a guy who really, I don't think was given much of an opportunity to get a formal education. I mean, he educated himself. I always respected this so much, really, from him or anybody. Just that you are responsible for your own education. And he and he was reading, and he was into classical music, um, and I remember being a little boy. He one day he got a book of poetry by William Wordsworth, and he was just so delighted and so tickled. And I think because it's, this stuff like Sir Walter Raleigh, and this came from the time and place that, when he was a young man, he would have heard this and read this, and it was in his kind of his native tongue, his native brogue, for lack of a better term, and William Wordsworth. And I can still remember him saying to me when I was a little boy, William Wordsworth, his words are worth reading, buddy. And I wanted to share this also. It's this Wordsworth. If you've ever read much poetry, you'll know it. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high or veils in hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in a never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on a couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. And I never really, he passed away when I was 18. And I wrote this blog entry from A River Between Chaos and Zen. This particular entry is Sunday, May 27, 2012. And whereas I had always written in school, and I always written poems, I had always written essays and lyrics and confessions and stories, and I had just written, but it never really it never really hooked me until this. And I mean, if I had to give thanks to anyone, above and beyond all, it's for this. I just wanted to cobble something together for Granddad. This is called Letters from Uncle Sid. It was at my grandfather's funeral, while the minister was delivering the eulogy, that I first heard my granddad was a writer. I was 18 at the time, and this came as a complete surprising news to me. Although never published, Mr. Robinson was a prolific writer. In the days that soon came to pass, and the trauma of his death wore thinner, I began to question my mom and my aunts and uncles. Granddad was a writer? Oh, yes, he wrote every day. Why was he never published? He never tried. Why? He had to raise a family. There was no time for that, and frankly, within my family, if I may digress for a second, the whole idea of poetry and being a painter or a writer or a musician or dancer or any of that was, quite frankly, a big fat waste of fucking time and was not encouraged at all. But goes on to say, my mom shared with me a box of letters he wrote to her during the 16 years that she and my father lived in New England. There were volumes of handwritten notes on onion skin paper reporting the comings and goings of the small rural Florida town where he lived, and painted with British colloquialisms, ribald humor, and love. Always much love to his dearest daughter from Dad. Phone calls of condolence from my family still in England came from across the pond, and with all the cousins saying, I shall miss my letters from Uncle Sid. It had been a few short weeks earlier that I was sitting on the bedside in the ICU holding his hand and telling him that I had been writing a lot of poetry lately, and I had just finished one last night, and I know it was a good one, I said, because it was about you. And his eyes welled up as he attempted to speak what was thwarted by the feeding tube and the oxygen tubes. He didn't have to say a word. The expression on his face told our story, and I said, I love you too, Granddad. And that was the last time I saw him alive. So it came to be that a week or so after his passing, I was sitting on the edge of my bed in the wee hours of the morning, tripping on a hit of acid. I became aware of him sitting next to me on my left. I felt a great wind and a vacuum that I can only imagine is what it is like to be swept up in a tornado. My perception left my body, and I observed from above my granddad passing through me and leaving the gift of his love of writing, and then he was gone. My perception returned to my body to discover me gasping for air. When I regained my breath, I began to cry uncontrollably. When the deluge of tears ceased, I lunged for the nearest paper and pen and began to write with a drive and a ferocity and a passion I had never before possessed and has never left me since. It was in that hallucinogenic midnight I was struck by the lightning bolt of a sudden enlightenment by the essence of someone who will love me forever, and that I came to realize it is not the eloquent configuration of words that provide a map towards immortality. It is the indefatigable spirit that weaves them. It is the unseen force behind the hand that drives the pen to write regardless of whatever extenuating circumstances may prevail, because it is poetry that can speak eternally from beyond the lips of death. And I could say so much here, but I want to share one last thing. I don't know if he ever read Walt Whitman or not. He probably did, but frankly, my grandfather was more of a father to me than a lot of people, if I'm being truly honest. But this is Walt Whitman, and I just wanted to finish up with this. I just wanted to say, again, if you read poetry to any degree, you'll know this one. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wrack. The prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh, heart, 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 oh, the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. Oh, captain, my captain, rise up and hear the bells, rise up, for you the flag is flung, for you the bugle trills. For you bouquets and ribbon wreaths, for you the shores a crowding, for you they call, the swaying mass their eager faces turning. Here, captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head, it is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead. My captain does not answer. His lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm. He has no pulse, nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells, but with mournful thread walk the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. Thank you for listening. May the long-time sun shine upon you. All love surrounds you, and the pure light within you guide your way.